Are you listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any other platform where you can leave a rate or review? Do you like what we're doing? If the answer to all of that is yes, please consider quickly giving us a 5-star rate. And if you wouldn't mind leaving us a nice review, we greatly appreciate that as well. Okay, let's do this.
Hello, welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 287 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we're discussing chapter 15 of A Dance with Dragons, which is Davos 2.
And as always, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you. Unless, of course, you have a Buy Me a Coffee Sustainer tier that includes spoilers, then we are going to spoil things for you. Regardless, hopefully we'll provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes that provide some additional information about the characters and geography of this chapter. How are you, Mackelly?
I'm doing well. I'm doing better than Stacy is right now. I might have given her a heart attack a minute ago.
Go on.
I don't know if you deal with this type of situation around your house, but even though Stacy knows that I'm in the house with her, if I walk into a room that she didn't know I didn't visualize seeing me walk into, she screams as if surely I must be an intruder that has come into the second floor into our bedroom or wherever.
I don't really have that. I mean, you live in a slightly bigger house than me. We bump into each other all the time in my house. But I do, if I ever scare Carson, she always thinks it's on purpose. And I would never do that. I would never scare her on purpose, but she always firmly believes it was on purpose that I did it.
Yeah, I don't think Stacy thinks I'm doing it on purpose. I think she... sometimes I'm just like, no, that's not real. You're embellishing. I literally just left the room and came back.
You know I live in the house too.
Right, exactly. It's out of control sometimes.
Your first thought should be, it's my husband. Your second thought should be, scream because it's an intruder.
Yes, default to, oh, that's the other guy I share this house with. So she was down here in the basement vacuuming, and I came down, and she had her earbuds in and was listening to something.
Oh, well.
And
that's a little bit different. That's a little bit different than she's sitting in a room and someone walks into the room and she screams.
A little bit, except for that she knows what time of night it is and knows where I record. So, anyway, how are you doing, my friend? It's good to see you.
I'm good. You just reminded me, when I was a kid, growing up in England, my father would, after everyone went to bed, my father would go down the road to the local pub for a quick pint. Then he would come back, and he would never take his door key, so he would always come to the back door, which was never locked. And one night he sort of stumbled to the back door, and I don't know, he was having trouble getting through the door or something. I make him sound like a complete lush, but I think the door got locked for some reason. And my mum, believing him to be a intruder, went down with a 1 foot long plastic ruler and opened the door and started slashing at him with it.
Had it been an intruder, I'm not sure that would have been the most
that's what he said to her. He said, that's probably going to hurt me, but it's not going to stop an intruder.
Right. Have a nice little welt on the forehead maybe, but I don't know if that would be sufficient enough of a deterrent.
Well, I don't have any good stories. My team did win the championship, so I was very happy about
right.
That. Yeah.
Yes. Congratulations.
We took care of business. We won 5-0 the last game of the season, and nobody could catch us. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd say you did.
But my good story for this week is actually my brother's. My brother was telling us this on the family call the other day. He lives in France. He speaks good French, but he doesn't volunteer to get into, philosophical discussions in French. He's aware of his limitations and tries to keep it simple.
Makes sense.
And people were arriving to stay at the place, and he was expecting a party of 14 to go into Gîte de Mur, as it's called. And
Big
car
party.
came down the driveway while he was working, and the car pulled up, and he sort of waved to them, and he said, "Oh, I don't know what the family name was. The Smiths."
Right.
I mean, they were French, so let's go for something a little bit more interesting. The Levesques, yeah.
Right.
Levesques, party of 14, Gîte de Mur. And the guy driving looked stricken and said, "Yeah." And then my brother said, "Well, go park over there, and then, the door's open, and help yourself, and I'll be over there to help you in a minute." And the guy went off and drove and did all that. And then 15, 20 minutes later, 3 more cars arrived with the rest of the party. Okay. And they had balloons and things in their cars.
Oh no. Okay. Where is this going?
The first guy came down to see my brother, and he said, "So the whole event was a surprise 80th birthday party for my mother, who was sitting in the back of the car and heard what you said."
Oh no! Whoops. Did I do that?
My brother said, over the course of the week that they were there, my brother fished 3 or 4 times for forgiveness.
Yeah.
And each time the guy said, "And you ruined the surprise."
I never got it. He never got the forgiveness.
Not even close.
Well, yeah, how was he supposed to know,
Exactly. You got to put on the thing, yeah?
Yes, right. Yeah, put on the thing. Surprise party. Don't mention it to any patron that arrives.
But the funny thing about that is, what would you say? What you're not meant to mention,
Right, yeah, because he didn't say, "Oh, hey, the surprise birthday party is up."
Right. It was just the number 14, which is probably one of the few things that he got really strongly and, with good emphasis in French. Party of 14!
Yeah, everything else was just muddled through.
And Granny in the back is counting heads going,
right. Yeah, the guy could have just said, "He's English. What he meant to say was 4. He doesn't know
4,
his number."
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
All right, let's get down to business. How did we leave Davos Seaworth? Well, last we saw of Davos, he was being questioned by Lord Godric Borel of Sweet Sister about his plans. He'd been abandoned by Salladhor Saan and had to beg for favours from the Lord. Godric is tempted to earn favours from the Lannisters by turning over the hand of the rival king, but he has enough doubts to let Davos slip through his fingers and see him on his way to White Harbour. Mackelly, why don't we give the summary of this one?
Okay. Well, Davos reaches White Harbour aboard the Merry Midwife in the evening. Davos reflects on how much easier it would be to treat with a high lord and sway him into switching his allegiance if he had arrived with the large and colorful fleet of Salladhor Saan. Instead, he enters the city as he might have done 20 years ago. He sees signs that White Harbour has upgraded its defenses since he was last here, a good or bad sign depending on Lord Manderly's loyalties. Davos likes White Harbour, clean and orderly compared to most ports. His first captain, Roro Yohoris, reckoned he could tell every port by their smell, comparing them to women, and White Harbour smelled like a mermaid should.
Davos wonders about his choices. The sensible move would have been to stay with Salladhor Saan. He could see his wife Maria and his remaining sons. But at Eastwatch by the Sea he was given some hope. The Manderlys have no love for the Boltons, but his time at Sisterton had undermined that. White Harbour was now in league with the Boltons and Freys. But Davos could not dwell. He sees that the new jetty wall could hide many warships. He sees the merman sigil flying everywhere, but no sign of any direwolf. But no lions either.
Well, that's something. He surveys the ships in the harbor. They come from all over. Trade hasn't stopped here, obviously. But the warship Lionstar is the knife in Davos's hopes. It carries King Tommen's standard. They tie up and Davos makes a deal with the captain, Casso Mogat. He should be back in 1 day, 3 at the most. If not, there would be no point for the captain to wait any longer. The customs men pay Davos no heed. He's not the captain. He makes his way through the docks and into the city proper. The cobbled square, Fishfoot Yard, is notable for a merman fountain, known as Old Fishfoot. He sees the old mint's doors open and hundreds of refugees within. He learns from an apple seller that they've come down the White Knife River fleeing from Bolton mischief.
Davos also learns that young men are being co-opted into Manderly's barracks. He makes his way to the Lazy Eel, 2-star Yelp, but cheap and full of gossip. It's quiet now, so he secretes himself into a shadowy alcove. He stares into the fire. Melisandre can see the future there, but Davos can only see the past. The burning ships, the chain, the wildfire. He doesn't understand why he was saved and his sons were not. He hopes that the gods were sparing him for this moment, to bring White Harbour to Stannis' cause. The eel begins to fill up, and the gossip flows with the wine. Tywin dead at Tyrion's hand, Lysa Arryn murdered by a singer, Littlefinger in charge in the Eyrie, but Bronze Jon Royce has sworn to bring him down, Balon Greyjoy dead, and his brothers squabbling for the Seastone chair, Sandor Clegane turned outlaw, plundering and killing along the Trident, Mia, Lys and Tyrosh at war, slave revolts in the east.
Robert Glover is in White Harbor trying to raise men, but with little success. Wyman has turned a deaf ear, and White Harbor is weary of war. The Risewells and Dustons had surprised and dispatched Ironborn along the Fever River. Ramsay Bolton rides south with the Umbers to attack Moat Cailin. The gossipers debate about what Lord Wyman should do. Ought to send the men to curry favor with the Boltons, since the Lions have his son. Nobody speaks of Stannis and his great deeds in the north. Davos contributes to the discussion. He thought Wyman's son was killed by the Freys. Other son, it's explained.
Davos is in despair. All of this intel is bad for Stannis. He knows that he would do anything to rescue his own sons. Now talk turns to dragons. Viserys is dead, but Aegon and Rhaenys might have survived the sack of King's Landing. No, it's Viserys' sister Daenerys. Rumour has it she now has 3 dragons. The speaker got that news from the steward of a ship's captain in Carth. Davos dreams of taking his sons east to see these wonders one day. But he's heard enough. He thinks of his next move. Talk to Wyman Manderly pointlessly. Ride north and tell Stannis. Go home.
He recalls Axel Florent at Eastwatch by the Sea, telling them that a Targaryen prince kept an ape as a pet and kept offering him for marriage. But even dressed in silk, he remained an ape, so there were no takers. Several of Selyse's men grinned at Davos during that story. The city gates are closed and he can't return to the Merry Midwife, so he climbs the hill. When he gets to the new castle, he can see behind the jetty wall and he counts 23 warships there. Wyman Manderly has not been idle. When a postern gate opens, he tells the guard that he has business with the Lord of White Harbor. Okay.
So yes, I think actually for once it's not the last sentence. It's the seeing the ships is the key sentence here, because Wyman Manderly has. Well, I mean, what's he been doing? I mean, he's built 23 warships. That's an enormous fleet for these times. And especially given the mayhem of the Blackwater, a fleet of 23 warships is a significant military advantage to whoever gets it.
Absolutely.
Why has Wyman Manderly been doing this? Well, who knows? It certainly makes his bargaining position that much greater for whoever he sides with.
Sure does. We were there with him in the Bran chapter when he made the request to Roderick and Lewin and Bran that he wanted to start building warships.
Right.
So I guess he either got the sign off he wanted, or he thought all 3 of them were dead and thought, I'm just going to start building ships anyway.
Right. But of course, that's a very good point to bring up, because the context then is he was building those warships to fight for the North.
Right. You'd think so originally. Yeah. And now,
but what is fighting for the North now?
Right. Exactly. His allegiances are muddy now.
Right. Because arguably fighting for the North would be fighting for Stannis, because Stannis is the person who Ned Stark thought should have been the next king.
Yes. If Wyman Manderly knew this fact.
Wait, I suppose he probably would, right? Because Ned send out a lot of ravens with.
He never got a chance to. He sent out a raven
that
to
never
Stannis.
happened.
He had wanted to send out a raven to Stannis, but Maester Pycelle, I believe,
It
never
was
actually
Stannis himself who sent out those ravens. Less reliable as a source, yes.
I'm sure Ned Stark would have chosen me.
I am definitely the rightful king. They're definitely children of incest. And if Ned Stark was here, he'd tell you, back me up. Back my blue.
Right.
We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes.
So exactly. I mean, who does Wyman Manderly? I mean, ultimately, it's so confused. You do what's best for you.
Yeah, right.
Because sure, fighting for the North would be fighting for the Boltons.
Yeah,
but
it's not. As Cotter Pike tells Davos at Eastwatch, there's not a lot of love between the Boltons and the Manderlys, and
right, yeah.
And
Bolton's inhumanity, to be honest.
Right, yeah, exactly. There's not a lot of love between any Northern House and the Boltons, really. But I'm sure the Danella Hornwood marriage situation with Ramsay did not help matters at all. And also, now that unfortunately there was nobody survived to tell the truth of what happened, but there were Manderly men at Winterfell when the Boltons, committed treason and killed their own allies. Unfortunately, no one survived to say what really happened, though. So they wouldn't probably know that, but still.
But so the calculus for Wyman Manderly, I mean, really there are only two sides, right? Because, well, I suppose there's three sides, maybe. There's Stannis, there's the Boltons, Freys, Lannisters.
Right.
Which you see as a group. There's the Iron Islands.
Yeah. I'm not sure anybody wants the Ironborn there.
Exactly. No way. So Stannis is the purest of those, but
right.
His claim is strong, but Wyman Manderly, White Harbour's 23 ship fleet would be 97% of Stannis' force right there.
It really would at this point. Yeah. They see the presence. Well, not they. Davos sees the presence of the defenses that White Harbor has been putting up, and he thinks that could be good or bad depending on the loyalties of Wyman Manderly. If it's against Stannis, what he doesn't know is that it's unnecessary because Stannis' entire fleet was either destroyed in the Blackwater or just abandoned him when Salladhor Saan took off.
Yeah.
So
sort of going back to the beginning of the chapter, I really like, I mean, not necessarily the beginning of the chapter, but sort of the core of the chapter is Davos spending time in Davos's natural habitat, which is sort of like the seedy underbelly of a port city, and it's a good conjunction of things. You sort of I like the fact that he wasn't just a listener to the gossip; he was joining in and sort of poking on things and trying to get more information at the same time. Because he genuinely was like, "But wait, I thought his son was dead.
Right,
his son was dead." So. But learning that there was an extra son who was a prisoner must have been like, okay, that coffin was already nailed down, but thank you for one more nail in that coffin.
And that was a big nail right there.
Yeah. Because he himself then starts thinking about his own personal experience, which is, I would betray Stannis in a heartbeat.
Right.
To save my sons.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. Him sneaking into White Harbor on this old cog. It's certainly not how he envisioned it when he left Eastwatch. He thought he was going to sail in at the head of a large, impressive fleet showing Stannis' naval strength, when the royal fleet, we know, was equally, if not more so, depleted during the Battle of the Blackwater, because at least Stannis had this Lyseni fleet.
Right.
And that might have been effective, except for now he has no Lyseni fleet, and to make matters worse, the Freys already are here. They already beat him here. So in hindsight, or knowing what we know now, it's probably best that he didn't come in with any fanfare to not draw attention to himself, because things have become more complicated than he thought they were going to be when he left Eastwatch.
And of course, he has the opportunity to tell a lie here. I know that's not Davos's natural thing, but if he says they dropped me under cover of night and then they've sailed off, he said, but we have Salladhor Saan, we have the strongest fleet, but looking at your warships, we have the joint strongest fleet in the Narrow Sea. And between the two of us, we can completely dominate,
Right, yeah, if he could pull that off. You're right, I don't know that it's in Davos's nature to tell a story as such, but if he could pull that off, it might be something.
Your alternative, Davos, is to go and see the Lord of White Harbour and say, I'm here as an emissary of Stannis Baratheon. He would have sent more people to sort of as a diplomatic mission, but I'm his only friend.
I'm an army of one.
It's me and him. So we really need your help to risk your life and fortune and your son's life to join us against the Lannisters. What do you say?
How could he possibly refuse that offer?
Mm-hmm.
But, something that struck me today as I was thinking about the chapter and kind of going through it one final time, when he gets off the Merry Midwife, well, actually, it's before he gets off. It's right before he gets off. He says to the captain, the captain says, how long are you going to be gone? And he says, if things go well, I'll be gone a day. And the captain said, well, I'm going to be here for 3 days max. And Davos said, well, okay, you don't have to wait for me if I don't make it back within those 3 days. But I thought, why would he be going back to the Merry Midwife? What would the plan be there? To sail back to Sisterton and then take a ship from Sisterton back up the Narrow Sea to Eastwatch? Like, where's he going when he gets back to the Midwife?
I assumed that that's his way out if Manderly says no.
Yeah.
And therefore, exactly what you just said, he's basically going to try and find passage back to the wall to tell Stannis the bad news. Unless Stannis gave him and if that doesn't work, then go to...
Right, and try this, Lord. Yeah, I guess it's just if things go well, I'll be back in a day. Well, if things go well, then he got the allegiance that he was looking for. Why would he be back here in a day? I don't know. It's just something I was wondering. What's he going to do? I thought maybe he was just coming to tell him, hey, I'm done. You can go. You don't have to wait around for 3 days.
Maybe what he's thinking is either he's going to arrest me and sell me to the Lannisters, or he's going to say yes, in which case I don't need a ride home. We can send a raven to the wall and I can spend a couple of weeks here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Could be.
It was mentioned, and I think I knew this at one point, but you know me, that the Manderlys brought the Faith of the Seven to White Harbour when they left the Reach, and so they are unusually devout. Well, I mean, I'm not saying they're particularly devout, but they don't worship the old gods, which is unusual in the North.
Very much.
And do you know why they left the Reach? Do you have something?
I do, and in background, I'm going to tell you all about it.
Oh. Well, let's prime that discussion. Nice, well done. So, one thing I'd like to speculate on, and maybe you already know this, but how did the Lionstar, Tommen's boat, come to be here? Now,
I read your take here. I found it fascinating. Yeah, it makes sense. So go on. Please explain.
Does the Royal Navy have so many boats at its disposal that they can just send one off to... And what did it do? It came to White Harbour. Now, I can kind of see why it would come to White Harbour, but it seems to have brought Freys with it.
Right.
Where did it get those Freys? I was trying to look geographically how it would pick up those Freys. There's two places where I could think of where a Frey could get to the coast. One is to come down the Trident to Salt Pans. You could go there and then be picked up there.
With the state of Salt Pans, they'd probably go all the way down to Maidenpool a little further.
Yeah,
you know?
You're right. So along that path, yeah. The other way is overland to the west coast to Seaguard, but then that ship would have to traverse all the way around the continent and back again. So that doesn't seem very likely. Yeah.
That would be a long journey.
So they, but even Maidenpool is a long way inland, and then you've got to go back around the Erie, the Vale.
Yeah.
To get to White Harbour. So it's an enormous journey at a time when you can't afford to be wasting ships. At a time of year when the storms blow up in the narrow sea and threaten the ships that do sail there.
Right. Yeah, it is risky. But there's a lot of moving parts to make it happen.
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes.
The one thing is, of course, those Freys could have come from King's Landing, but I don't recall seeing too many Freys in King's Landing.
No, unless they rode all the way to King's Landing off screen to catch the Lionstar there.
To catch the boat, yeah, I suppose so. Yeah.
That seems like that would be they can't get past the neck, so they have to go some route along using the water in some way.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's funny. I looked at the geography of this as I was thinking about this, and I just assumed that somewhere on the east coast, between the neck and the Vale, there would be a port, but there really isn't. There's nothing there.
It's very mountainous.
The neck runs into the mountains of the moon, and basically there's no way to get to the sea there.
Right. Well, I could tell you why the Lionstar is available, unlike most of the Royal Fleet. And
Go on.
There's a good reason why it's available and wasn't destroyed in the Battle of the Blackwater. It's because
let me guess. It wasn't there.
Yes. It wasn't there. Do you know where? You know where she was, the Lionstar?
No, I don't know where she was, but the only logical reason you could avoid getting destroyed at the Battle of the Blackwater is to not be on the Blackwater.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, she was part of the fleet that escorted Marcella all around the Narrow Sea and eventually to Sunspear. So,
you know that's not canon, just by the way. That's Simon and Mackelly canon.
There was enough stops along the way that I think we could make that comment. Yeah, she was part of that team. So pretty much most of the Royal Fleet that survived that was that that fleet that had that task.
So we heard of it coming back to King's Landing since then?
I don't recall that we have.
Yeah. Because, I mean, if it hasn't been back and gotten new instructions, then these instructions were laid down a long time ago.
It had to have. It had to have come back and been told, okay, now go pick up the Freys at Maidenpool and shuttle them up to White Harbour.
It may have stopped back at King's Landing before it went to Dawn, to be honest.
It might have. Maybe the Freys have been waiting there. They were on the boats, on the ships with Marcella. It's all part of the plan.
While she was sailing to Dawn, they were walking and they caught up with her.
Well, it was all part of the plan. Well, you're going to stop at Maidenpool. You're going to pick up some Freys. You're going to take them up to White Harbour. Then you're going to go across to Bravos, down to Pentos.
The trip to Seaguard and back, sure, we could take that on. No problem.
But, the Lionstar is not the only ship that was noticed when Davos is looking around at the ships in the harbor. He notices a trading galley named the Storm Dancer, And we were introduced to her a long, long time ago. Do you remember where?
Oh, Mackelly with the jokes. I like it.
I asked this question sincerely, and then I thought, wait, why am I asking that question?
No, I do not remember where we saw this. Was it the Storm Dancer?
Yes, the Storm Dancer. It sounded vaguely familiar, so I had to go look it up. And the Storm Dancer is the ship that took Catelyn and Sir Roderick to King's Landing when, after the dagger situation and with the
I remembered that they went by ship as opposed to swimming.
Yep, that was the ship, the Storm Dancer. So she's still making her way around. She didn't get taken out by a storm, which is good.
Yeah, she dances through.
That's right.
So Davos notices that the Old Mint, which heretofore on his visits to White Harbour had always been closed, never open. The doors are thrown open. You can see hundreds of refugees inside. So that's a sign of the turmoil in the north. And what's particularly worrying, and also potentially good news for Davos, is that the refugees are refugees from the Boltons, not from anything, not from the Greyjoys.
Yeah, that's a distinction. That's a noteworthy distinction.
Yeah.
Because the Boltons are now technically the Wardens of the North. But Ramsay Bolton's depravity is causing people to flee the area. It's hard to rally around a family that has, that kind of situation going on, I would think.
Yeah. I do wonder, and this is something that I don't know if it warrants too much discussion, but should Stannis consider reaching out to the Boltons? The Boltons have got what they want from the Lannisters now. There's nothing more the Lannisters can give them.
Yeah.
And Tywin's dead. If you know who the Boltons are, you know that the Boltons are looking for their next deal to improve their station.
Yeah. Gosh, that had never crossed my mind about that idea. So I'm pondering it for the first time ever right now.
Mm-hmm. Because the one thing you could do, let me expound on it while you think, because I did throw it. This is not in the notes. This is purely off the cuff. But the one thing you could do, the North is clearly in some turmoil, and a lot of that turmoil is caused by the fact that the one family who've up-jumped everybody else is not the most popular. There are plenty of other families who the North could have rallied around in the absence of the Starks.
Right.
The Boltons were way down that list.
In popularity,
they were strong and rich and powerful, but they were not popular, not well liked. Right. And they've jumped to the top of the queue. So now you've got turmoil in the North, which Stannis is trying to take advantage of by picking off the houses, the Karstarks here, he's probably failing with the Karstarks, but the Manderlys here, he's trying to get, nickel and dime one by one, other things. But if you went to the Boltons, you might be able to say to the Boltons, look, we can help you cement your position if you turn the tables on the Lannisters and take our side.
Yeah, there's some possible chance at merit there. I wouldn't say it's impossible. I guess. Yeah, I mean, it could. The Freys complicate things because the Freys are the third party in this whole situation.
Definitely doesn't help. But now that the Lannisters have kind of dropped out of it to a certain extent because of Tywin being dead.
Yeah. I see how you're throwing out the at least extending the olive branch for the discussion, Hey,
yeah.
I have an idea. We're all up here in the North together.
Right. Yeah. But also, you could also use it as leverage for Manderly, for instance, because you could say to Manderly, look, we are making a pact with the Boltons here to bring the North together on our side. Once we establish ourselves as the true rulers of the Seven Kingdoms, we are going to look very carefully at what's gone on in the north, and we're going to remember what the Boltons did to the Starks, and then we're going to look for new wardens of the north. And one name that jumps to mind is the Manderlys.
Yeah, absolutely. The Manderlys are probably the wealthiest family, I believe, in the north. I just don't know if anybody knows what the Boltons did to the Starks, because the Boltons blamed it on the Ironborn, and they're the only ones telling the story. So they've painted themselves as heroes.
And the Boltons' involvement in the Red Wedding is not well known either.
Probably not in the north, because the only people that survived from the north were Bolton allies. So, and the ones that are held captive, but they're not telling anybody right now.
So presumably Stannis doesn't know.
Yeah, right. But generally the Boltons are unfavorable, so that holds true.
Right, but there you go, you see. So now Stannis has no reason to hate the Boltons. He doesn't know of their treachery. All he knows is that the Lannisters have jumped them up to the highest level that they can. You might infer that they've done the Lannisters a favour, but you don't know it.
Right now the Freys are the face of the Red Wedding.
Right.
It happened at the Twins. It happened under their watch. Yeah. Whether the Boltons survived or were participants, it is probably left up for personal interpretation and debate.
Well, anyway, just stay nimble, Davos. Stay nimble.
That's right.
There's deals to be struck, I tell you.
But speaking of the old mint, which you just, that's what brought on this whole conversation, because the refugees are fleeing the Boltons and not the Ironborn, according to the apple seller anyway.
Yeah.
In that same conversation where Wyman asked for permission to start building the fleet with Lewin, Roderick, and Bran, he also asked for permission to start minting coins in Robb's image. And sadly, either Lewin and Roderick, and as far as they all know, the rest of them think, Bran died before he could ever get the answer he needed. But also, sadly, Robb is no longer around to mint coins in his image. So
you're saying that the handful that did get minted could be very valuable.
That's right. They're very rare. Yeah. I'm guessing they call it old because it likely hasn't been used since Aegon's conquering. But when there were kings in the north, they were probably minting images with the Starks. So
Davos, of course, is still questioning why he's still alive and why, and to any father who outlives their children, that's probably a question that rattles around in your head. But it's sort of good that he has purpose, because he did think to himself, well, maybe this is it. Maybe this is why the gods saved me, so that I could do this, So given that this looks doomed to fail, or at least doomed to be tricky, then hopefully he can just move on to the next impossible challenge for maybe this is why they saved me. Maybe this is why they saved me.
Something to keep him going, something to keep him thinking that...
Tilting at windmills for the rest of his life. Yeah.
Right, yeah. But so while they're sitting in the... what was it called?
The lazy eel?
Yeah, that's it. So while they're sitting in the lazy eel, Davos he's listening to the sailors talk. And
just one second, sorry. Can we start this again? Because I think it's unfair that you went back and re-recorded you remembering the lazy eel when it was me that remembered it.
What it was called.
You don't get to go back and have a do-over. You get to go, oh, wow, Simon remembered something.
That's a good point. Where were... Oh.
Sorry, I don't know. You were in the lazy eel, I think.
Davos is just sitting back in the shadows and listening to the sailors talk, and he said, nothing flows amongst sailors as much as gossip, aside from wine. Wine and gossip flow freely when sailors are around. And he gets news of the known world, and the first part that we're going to start off with is surprisingly accurate, although not completely accurate, not 100%, but surprisingly for a bunch of sailors talking in a...
I will say this is a George Martin trope, actually, that he loves to share gossip, which is 60% accurate, 20% nonsense, and 20% absolute golden bullets,
Yes. Yeah, like, so, for instance, Tywin dead at the hands of Tyrion, I mean, correct. That's true. They got that right. And it wasn't even like, they were, we've heard other rumors that Tyrion tore Tywin apart with his bare hands and was covered in, head to toe in blood and all that. Wasn't even that outlandish like that.
Yeah. But the other detail that they nailed there was that the corpse smelled so bad that slightly exaggerated that no one could enter the Sept of Baelor because of the stink, but that wasn't quite that bad, but it was certainly noticeably horrible, the smell of him.
Yes, it smelled bad enough that some of the folks that were there got sick and fainted. So,
yep.
I mean, it's possibly true that no one wanted to enter the Sept afterward. They could have that detail, right? We just don't know about it.
And then the news from the Vale is exactly correct for the story that's being circulated,
right? Which
is that Lysa Arryn was murdered by the singer. We happened to be present when that happened, and it most certainly was not the singer. It was most certainly Littlefinger that did it. But the official story has certainly reached the sailors' ears, and the follow-on that Littlefinger is now Lord Protector of the Vale, very true. And Bronzion Royce isn't happy about this.
Right. He was part of the Lord's Declarant that did agree to the 1-year trial period.
Right. And that's what I was going to say. So the gossip had it that he was determined to bring Littlefinger down, but the reality was that he had sort of like made peace with it for now.
Right. He did leave, after that parlay, when Lyn Corbray drew a steal at the parlay, and that's how Littlefinger ended up getting that 1 year. Jon left the Eyrie angrily. He didn't wait. He didn't stick around for the feast, and he has held out. Like the rest of the Lord's Declarant have started to come around to the idea of Littlefinger, but he's still kind of holding out.
So maybe the sailors know more than us in this case.
Right, yeah, maybe. They might. Yeah, and it's pretty accurate, too, about what's going on in the Iron Islands, that Balon Greyjoy has died, and that his brothers are fighting over the Iron Throne. It's a bit outdated. Balon did die. The brothers did fight over the Sea Stone Chair, but we know, because we were there. Also, his daughter was part of the fight as well.
True.
But we were there at the King's Moot. Euron won. Victarion conceded. Aeryn refused to accept it and has disappeared. So, but surprisingly pretty accurate.
Yeah. Although somewhat predictable. I mean, if I told you one thing, if you were a sailor and I told you one thing, Balon Greyjoy has died, the next sailor you tell it to, you'd say, and his brothers are fighting over the Sea Stone Chair, because it's kind of a pretty good guess,
Yeah, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. And they very accurately that Sandor Clegane has turned outlaw and is plundering and killing along the Trident. This is true. I'm using air quotes,
right,
listeners.
Yeah, you can't blame them that they believe this story. It's widely accepted truth.
Exactly, right, exactly. We believe it not to be true because we believe Sandor Clegane is dead.
Yes, the elder brother of the Quiet Isle
buried him
Brienne,
himself.
Yes, he died in the elder brother's arms, and we did later at the end of the Crossroads. We saw Rorg wearing the Hound's Head helmet. So,
and that's the kind of scoundrel who would murder and plunder along the Trident.
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm. And the last one was that, the last one was that Lys, Mia, and Tyrosh are at war. Is that true? I know they're always a little bit at each other's throat, but I didn't know if there was actual war going on. I feel like that's a sort of like a nudge towards there are sellswords in the field in that area who are looking to take sides, and that's going to sort of trigger hostilities between those cities, rather than outright war happening between them.
Right. the most that we know, like the most information we have, is the fact that the Golden Company broke their contract with Myr.
Right.
So,
right.
I mean, we don't really have anybody on the scene there, but we do know that the Golden Company has broken their contract. Yeah. So,
but the second part of the Essos news is accurate, which is slave revolts in the east. But it's semi-accurate. It's not a from within uprising of the slaves. It is a from without arrival of Daenerys and dragons.
True,
helping the slaves.
Yeah. Good distinction. Yes, but we get some new info that we learn and that Davos learns. That is, it's all both very important and also increasingly troublesome to Davos and Stannis' cause. We find out that Robert Glover is actually in White Harbor and unsuccessfully trying to raise troops, mostly because the Manderlys, or Wyman, specifically Wyman, is ignoring his pleas, and it's rumored that White Harbor is tired of war. They just want it over with.
All of that is bad news for Stannis, etc. But it is somewhat belied by the other thing that Stannis learned, which is that the refugees, the males, are being invited to join Manderly's army.
Right. Yeah.
If he's tired of war, that's a slightly strange step.
It is. It is quite an interesting contradiction there. You're tired of war, but you're building an army. Okay.
Right.
Now, as far as Robert Glover goes, just a quick reminder on what's going on with him. He's the younger brother of Galbart Glover, who's I think he goes by Master of Deepwood Mott. And there's conflicting information depending on which appendix of which book you look at, whether Robert is Galbart's heir or if it's Galbart's son that is the heir to Deepwood Mott. So he's either the heir or not the heir, depending on which appendix you look in. But he was part of the group that was sent to Duskendale on the dubious mission from Roose and was ultimately captured by Randall Tarley. He got freed in a prisoner exchange between Robert and Tywin for Martin Lannister, Kevin's son. And we've had actually just as much interaction with Robert's wife and children as we have with Robert, because his wife and children were the family that was captured by Asha when she took Deepwood Mott and brought to the Iron Islands for the Kingsmoot.
That's right. And part of her pitch at the Kingsmoot was sending them back for...
Yeah, making a deal.
To send them home, yeah.
Okay.
I'd forgotten that was them, yeah.
Yeah, getting a section of the North instead of trying to get the whole North.
Right, yeah. Yeah. So the other one we heard was that Risewells and the Dustins have been torching Ironborn longships on the Fever River. I'm not sure where the Fever River is. Help me with that one, Mackelly.
It's on the west coast of the North. It feeds kind of into Moat Cailin and
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I forget the stuff north of the Neck.
And Davos thinks that this is even worse than Robert Glover trying to raise an army and the Manderlys being tired of war. And at first glance you'd think, why would that be? We want the Ironborn out of the North. But if you think about it from Stannis' perspective, the Ironborn are keeping Roose and company south of the Neck. So, giving Stannis kind of fish in a barrel to try and gather up as many Lord's allies as he can.
Yeah.
I believe that's why he thinks that's even worse.
No, yeah, I hadn't quite passed it, but now you've said that does make perfect sense. And it actually makes me feel like I'm dumber than Davos. Ramsay and Hotha Umber are riding from Moat Cailin from the north. Again, bad news, because if that north-south passage gets opened up, then the Boltons are strengthened by that. But also the news that the Umbers are siding with the Boltons is not good.
Right, that's bad news we knew that because we were in that Reek chapter where Hotha Umber was one of the lords that was dining with Ramsay. But yeah, it's another lord likely lost. Another house likely lost. But we also, in that line, if the news is true, it explains what war Ramsay told Reek about. Remember, he said, I'm riding to war to bring home my virgin bride.
Yeah.
So now I guess we learn what that war is. It's to remove the Ironborn from Moat Cailin.
Okay. We must have talked about that in spoilers because I already knew.
Oh, yes. I believe that we did.
Okay.
And then he calls the worst news of all the fact that Willis Manderly, the heir to White Harbor, is a captive of Lannisters. And we hit on that a little bit at the beginning of our discussion. Godric Borrell, the Lord of Sisterton, where Davos just came from, he only mentioned Wendell, Willis's younger brother, his bones being returned to White Harbor. And Davos recognizes, like you said, he would do whatever's necessary to keep his own son safe, which is a little bit, when he's thinking this right now, because this is not yet the end of the chapter, when he's thinking about it, you start to pick up on what he's going to do at the end of the chapter. Because Devon is squire to Stannis, and the King Stannis' fate is directly tied to whether Davos can win this White Harbor alliance. Yeah. So doing whatever it takes to keep his son safe is, trying to doing whatever he needs to win this alliance.
True. I can think of other things you could do though, like go back, get your son and sail south.
Right, that's an option. Yes.
Yeah. Not a very popular option with Stannis, I would imagine, but just a thought. But yeah, I take your point. It is something that might sort of like shore up his courage to take this on.
Right. Because I have to for my son's sake.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
With the knowledge of Willis, captive of the Lannisters, you can see that it really all his plan in his mind that he had going into White Harbor is really starting to fall apart now. And we know the outcome. So it's kind of hard to watch it continue toward failure and worse, And we also know that Willis was released by Jaime from Harrenhal, supposedly sent home. It hasn't happened yet where we are right now, I don't believe. In Dance, but we know because we were ahead in Feast that it will happen.
Right.
So, but then that begs the question: will the return of Wyman's heir affect his loyalty at all once he gets his heir back?
Yeah.
Do whatever you say. Do whatever you have to do. Say whatever you have to say to get your heir back. But once you have him back, does that change things at all?
Yeah. We shall see. In the Lazy Eel, the talk finally turns to dragons, and it gets way off topic of anything really useful to Davos. Although he kind of gets excited about the idea of it, that maybe one day he and his sons will travel to Essos and see these wonders. Was there anything useful? I mean, the talk about Baelor and the Maiden Vault was stuff we both know and better than the people gossiping in the Lazy Eel, honestly.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it seemed that the Bravasi sailor had the details right all along, despite all the conjecture and talk that 3 girls and a dragon went to the captain of the Slow-Eyed Maid and tried to book passage back to Westeros. But, as Davos is leaving, he thinks about the ship the Slow-Eyed Maid, and he makes reference to knowing the ship's fate, and that it's cruel of the gods to let a man sail all the way across the world and then have him follow a false light right before he gets home. And what he's referring to is Godric Borrell told him of a ship blown onto the rocks in Sisterton, and he took all its cargo, including the saffron that they were eating in their soup, whatever it was.
I remember. Yeah.
And Davos knows that in Sisterton they set up false lighthouses so that ships crash on the rocks, and that ship the ship with the saffron was the Slow-Eyed Maid.
Ah, there you go. Probably best Danny didn't climb aboard.
Yeah, I guess so.
So basically the chapter ends with Davos seeing these 23 warships, and Cotter Pike had told Davos that Wyman was building war galleys. So
Right.
he wasn't. Yeah. That's why he wanted to see behind that jetty wall to see what was there, but probably was thinking to see one or two. But to see 23, Wyman Manderly is committed to something more than just defense. If you're building 23 of them,
absolutely. And as you said earlier, that makes him an even more valuable ally.
Right, for sure.
Because both sides,
to all sides, yeah, exactly.
Yes, they're both short on ships. Yeah,
yeah. I, if I were Wyman Manderly, I would say to the Boltons, there better not be any more people coming down the White Knife River to eat my food. If you want me on your side, you know.
Right. I've got these 23 ships that you need.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, Davos sort of girds his loins and takes on the challenge. Like you said, I think part of it is protecting his son. Part of it is this newfound, just this little flicker of a spark of hope that Wyman Manderly has got more to him than just a bereaved parent hoping to get his child back,
Yeah. Yeah, he thinks of 4 plans. He could go forward with the plan. He could leave the service of Stannis and should have gone with Salladhor Saan, or return to Sisterton. He could return back home to Cape Wrath, or ride back to Castle Black. And I mean, the smartest plan, let's face it, is probably to go home, except for that you'd be abandoning your son at the wall. So, I guess there's that. The safest plan, just return to Castle Black, say, it didn't work out. I didn't get it. The most dangerous, fraught with peril, but yet honorable plan is to go forward, which no doubt is, I think the story from Axel Florent propelled him to go forward with it as much as anything else, to prove that he's not an up-jumped ape.
Right. Yes. An ape in Lord's clothing. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. All right. It's time for some spoilers. If you join us at the upper tiers of the Buy Me a Coffee Sustainer levels, you can get the spoilers. They're always interesting. All right, terrific spoilers. Thank you, Mackelly. How about some back? You've told us about the future. Now tell us about the past. Give me some background.
Okay, well, you asked the question.
I did ask this question.
Yes, you did.
It's funny. I don't read the background in advance, but sometimes I just know. I just ask the question during the discussion.
Yeah, well, so as you said, Davos mentions that the Manderlys brought the Faith of the Seven with them when they were driven from the Reach. So, long, long ago, in an episode far, far away. It was actually episode 58, which was a cat chapter.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah. I figured you did. All you needed was me to just prompt you. Yeah. I actually did a background on why it was that the Manderlys were made to move across the realm.
Was that the chapter where the ship, the Storm Dancer, got mentioned?
I don't think it was.
Okay.
No,
it's just funny because it's a cat chapter and it's the Manderlys. So I'm like, is this what on that ship?
Yeah. Well, as probably nobody else recalls that specific episode either, I'm going to remind you all what I said back then. And what I was saying was that the Manderlys once lived along the banks of the Mander River in the Reach, and some actually claim that the river was named after them, which it could have been a chicken and an egg thing. Yeah.
Yes, I was going to say vice versa also works.
Right. And they were, even back then, a noble house of great lords, and they held the castle Dunstanbury as their seat, and they had a fierce rivalry with House Peak. However, at some point, the Manderlys, shall I say, overreached themselves.
Bravo. Well done.
Thank you. And they were driven from the Reach by the Gardner Kings, who feared the Manderlys' growing influence and power in the kingdom. The Manderlys fled north and were welcomed by the Starks as bannermen. The Starks tasked them with defending the White Knife in return for an oath of fealty.
Oh, excellent. Yep, I didn't remember any of that, so thanks. I appreciate it.
That's all right. It's been a few years.
Yeah. Compared with the television show, Davos doesn't do any of this in the TV show, so I don't think there's really anything to compare. He spends this period at the wall with Stannis.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. They just had to simplify. There's too many strands at this point. The book. I mean, it's why Winds of Winter is taking so long.
Oh, yes.
There's so many strands.
The spaghetti bowl
TV show
full of it.
had to snip some of them, and just give them up.
Right.
Pedantry Corner, I don't have any pedantry. There's just a few character decisions that are curious here, Just, if Roose Bolton was on the scene, he would drown Ramsay. Because
you're causing a strife here.
Exactly. The Boltons could be Wardens of the North for the next 3,000 years, but they're going to get murdered by their bannermen because of Ramsay.
Yeah, you could certainly make that argument.
Yeah. But it's not pedantry because it's just character decisions, and Ramsay can't help himself. He's just a monster,
Right. Well, that's true.
Yeah. News and notes. You found the lost treasure of Apple Podcast Review.
Yeah. So I have to go country by country.
Okay,
because,
I see. Okay.
So I used to have this. There used to be this thing called Chartable that would tell me if a new review came in, regardless of where in the world it came from. But Chartable closed down, so now I have to do it manually. And I discovered this treasure trove of a pair of unread Apple Podcast reviews from Australia, of all places. So my apologies to the listeners who are Australian listeners who were so kind to go out and leave us a 5-star rating and a lovely review. And would you like to read this review?
I always like to do this. So this is from Shane Char, and the title is Best A Song of Ice and Fire podcast out there. Currently on my third reread with the pod and can't imagine reading through again without them. The discussions are in-depth and interesting, thank you for the quotes,
Yeah.
Picking up on things that the reader may have missed or forgotten while keeping the pod spoiler-free, thanks to Simon's memory, or lack thereof. Ouch! No, you see, my memory works the opposite way, though. Sometimes my memory allows me to blurt out a spoiler because I forget that people don't know that yet.
Well, sure. Yeah, it could go that way, too.
You won't regret giving these blokes a try, but like most pods, maybe start a few episodes in to get the real vibe of the show. Keep up the good work, guys. That is very kind of you, Shane, and also it's truthful and hurtful at the same time.
yeah, it's pretty spot on to us, right? Yeah. We have discussed going back and re-recording those early episodes, but there's something character building in watching us struggle at first.
I would seriously think about it were it not for the 50th. Was it the 50th episode where we went back and listened to the first episode?
I think that was 1 year.
That was the 1 year episode.
Molly was the 50th. Yeah,
it just wasn't as terrible as I feared it would be. I mean, we definitely improved. I'm not saying that, but it just didn't seem to warrant a whole re-record. But the problem is, of course, it is that thing of if you only listen to the first 3 episodes, you're like, I ain't listening to those amateurs.
Yes, right.
I'm not giving up 5 years of my life to those two.
Right. Yeah, it's a trade-off. But we've talked about those early episodes so much that in the following years, that if we went back and re-recorded them, the people listening in the future would be like, what was wrong with the early episodes? I don't get it at all.
That's true. They were the best. They were really good. They were so polished.
It's like they've been doing it for almost 6 years.
The thing is, we'd also have to not forget some of the key things we said, because we still reference episode 1 several times. Because it's still the best piece of pedantry, I think.
You're right.
Is the wall.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much, Shane Char. I apologize. That was posted back in last year, sometime in 2024. So I think it might have even been like March of 2024. So it's been a while. So I apologize for missing it. And like I've mentioned several times, if anybody else from a country outside of the U.S. has posted a review and we have not read it out yet, please reach out to me. It's only because I haven't found it in the list of hundreds of countries. So
yeah, thanks, Shane Shaw. Thanks again. All right, let's conclude this one. Davos has finally reached his destination, but his chances look slim. I mean, there's definitely discussion to be had, but it's just such a hard sell of
Yes,
such a low probability of success.
really is. With
Yeah.
each passing bit of information, it looks more and more bleak, his chances.
To be clear, I specifically meant the thing you're selling has such a low probability of success. The thing you're selling, namely being Stannis,
yes, I see. Yes, that too.
I agree. Davos's quest also has a very low probability of success, but that's because what he's selling has such a low probability of success.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned earlier, there is some contradictions going on. Wyman Manderly is simultaneously raising an army and talking. The word in White Harbor is that they're tired of war and they just want to be out of the war. So we're not given any explanation as to why he's raising that army. So it's an unknown factor. Godric Burrell seemed convinced that Wyman was joining the Lannister Bolton Frey side of the war. So
yeah, but raising an army keeps your options open. Not having an army maybe closes off some of your options, but having a large army at your disposal and 25 warships makes you a little more independent.
That is true. You can not go to war by being peaceful, or you can not go to war by being the stronger army. Yeah, I guess that's another way to go about it. But it is, the path. Unfortunately, we know where this road leads. We read A Feast for Crows. We know Davos's fate, and his path is just becoming more and more clear to his ending. At least to us, and maybe to him. I think he also realizes he doesn't have a very good chance here.
Yeah, he might think that diplomatically he's got some immunity here from the fate that's coming for him.
That's true.
It's a pretty lawless realm at the moment, so there's definitely a chance that he is foreseeing his end.
And the person leading the other side is possibly the most vindictive, self-focused person in the whole story, being Cersei Lannister.
Very true, very true. And we're learning that Roose and Ramsay Bolton are riding to war together, and that war will be fought at Moat Cailin. That's where they're hoping to reopen the neck to north-south traffic.
Yeah, and that's what Ramsay meant when he said we're riding to war. And I agree with Davos. Roose and his entourage returning to the north, likely better chance of being bad news for Stannis than a positive. You did propose the idea that maybe Stannis could flip Roose. It seems like a long shot, but I had never considered it, and I get there's a possibility.
I think it's less. The more I thought about it, the less of a long shot it appeared to me, because Tywin is dead and Stannis is in his full power.
Yeah, well, sort of.
If you sort of, but if you combine the all of the North, including the Manderlys and the Boltons, with Stannis and the Wildlings, suddenly you're a real force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, well, yeah, if he could manage to pull that all together, definitely.
And again, the one thing I'll say about that is the Boltons have nothing more to gain from their relationship with the Lannisters. They might gain something from their relationship with Stannis.
Yeah. What more do they need, though? They're already Wardens of the North,
Maybe the loyalty of their subjects.
Yes, that is true. Yeah. Yep.
Just that,
Proof.
That doesn't feel like that would be a big factor in Roose's thinking, but at the same time...
Certainly not in Ramsay's.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
I just had a thought. What would Jon do if Bolton and his entourage, his lords, ride on Castle Black for Stannis?
To join Stannis?
No,
to bring him down.
Yes, to bring Stannis down. What does Jon do? I mean, he's taken a vow to stay out of the wars of the realm. He would have to stand aside.
Yeah, he stands aside. Yeah. That's what he does. Does he know how Ramsay is to blame for his brother's death?
He doesn't. No.
He doesn't know that. So he doesn't have that personal animosity.
Right. Yeah, I think he has
he
to
steps
stand
aside.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and as he should. I mean, given the rules of the Night's Watch, that's what he should do.
Yep. Agreed.
Be unfortunate.
I would.
Stop planting ideas in George Martin's head, you. You know he listens.
He does.
All right. Next week, we cross the narrow sea to Essos, where we check in with our beautiful friend Daenerys.
And we are not only our beautiful friend Daenerys, but we're joined there by an old friend.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah. You have to tune in
see.
next week.
I haven't read it yet, so I don't know. All right, there's 3 ways that you can help us. You could leave us a positive review and a 5-star rating, as Shane Charge did, and eventually we'll notice it and read it out. That is so rich that you do all the work and I then complain about how long it takes you to find it. I'm like, come on. God. You can buy us a cup of Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostsharrenhall. There you can become a sustainer at any of the various levels. There's a tier to match your budget and interest. The upper tiers get you the spoilers, which are always fun. Or you can donate directly to our cause through our website, ghostsofharrenhall.buzzsprout.com.
And if you're looking for more ways to interact with us, well, first off, you can send us a text. The link is at the top of every episode's show notes. Please just keep in mind, we have no means of responding, but we do very much enjoy reading them, especially when they say nice things about us. And if you're interested in keeping up on the latest Ghost of Harrenhal news and developments, well, I suggest you go check us out on our social media. You can follow us on Twitter at Ghost Harrenhal, or on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, and YouTube.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.